In this story from the Post Millennial, Teen Vogue says Biden and Democrats are losing Gen Z support, claims they may not vote at all. I'm sure all the Republicans would absolutely accept either they don't vote or they vote for Trump. And then we have this from Vox.com. What Democrats panic over young voters misses. Okay, sure, whatever. The point is, even Vox is acknowledging Democrats are starting to freak out because more and more polls are coming out that somehow a 77-year-old Republican white man has garnered majority support among the youth vote.
Believe it.
It has been throughout my life. The youth vote is always a bunch of naive young Democrats.
Mm-hmm. That's how we got Obama.
Yeah, Obama's like, you vote for me, I'm going to not blow kids up. And then I was like, okay, sounds good to me. And then he's like, and then as soon as he got in, he was like, huh, psych, blow them up. Too many of them.
I can believe it. It's super believable because I just see a lot of the young kids, their whole culture is like based. Like I see a lot of them, just the most average kid, they like being base, and being base is kind of like being what conservatives would consider like, not unhinged, but they really don't give a F about what they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the most off the wall things that's considered base, liberals would not approve of. And majority of the youth like base culture. There's
this video of a young woman where she's like looking in the mirror, holding up her phone, and she's talking about how like, oh, you got offended because I said something? Well, that's too effing bad.
I love that you shared that.
Yeah, it's like it went viral. Young kids are seeing that kind of content mocking the woke going viral.
Yes.
They want to get followers.
You're right.
I watched one video where
right.
Some of it's super cringe. I'm sorry, guys. I get it. You're young. You're trying to find your shtick. And it's like this one dude, every single video is him sitting in his car screaming.
I like that guy. And he sounds like Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah. He's just like, why is it that all like? And I'm like, funny. Okay, like I get it. It's like he's people are trying to. So
wait, do you mean the guy that sounds like Gilbert Gottfried?
It might be. I don't know. But it's like a younger guy. Yeah. They're all trying to find their shtick. And so he does this thing where he's like, why is everything so expensive?
Yeah,
what's happening? And he's like, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. And I'm like, you're a Republican. The moment you say, I am not a Republican or a Democrat, you're a Republican. Mm-hmm. Those are the rules. I didn't make them up.
Unless you're Oliver Anthony, and then you're just irrelevant all of a sudden.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Right? Talk about one-hit wonder.
Well, he actually had a handful of really great songs.
Yeah, I mean, they were not bad songs.
I think the issue with him, and he's probably still enjoying a lot of success. Look, just because, the one song was the biggest song in the world at the time, he found his stable base of support. And you just don't see him because you're not a country music folk fan.
And he had like a baby and stuff too, right? Like he might not be as active.
But I will say this. He was really just a regular guy who did not understand that when he came out saying like, I'm not, political, he was telling all of the people who promoted him, back off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
We all backed off for sure.
Also, Democrats are always like, I am progressive, I am a feminist. Like they want you to know what their labels are, whereas it's
because
everyone
they have to
else
be
who's like
activists for their every aspect of their lives,
and they wear it as their whole identity, right? Whereas like you think for yourself, you might lean sort of conservative, you might think of yourself as a libertarian. Like if you have to look at me and say like, oh well, I'm not either one, then you're already not in the pool of people who probably hate you.
Well, and the thing too with you were going to say something, Dom. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think these polls kind of also exemplify the amount of propaganda that Democrats push out, because in the summer of 2023, I don't know if you remember, one of the main things they were pushing in their campaigns was Joe Biden had a lot of the Gen Z behind him. He was hiring a lot of Democrat influencers as well, like Harry Sisson and other young ones, Chris Maury, and like this black guy. So it was like 8 young influencers came out of nowhere in the summer. All of them had the same message, almost copy and paste, say, Gen Z loves Joe Biden. Gen Z loves Joe Biden. They would do it about 2 times every 3 days. And they just started to vanish off. You can see that their audience has just withered away. So I can definitely see they were pushing that propaganda super hard because they probably had these numbers before the general public.
Right. Like Sisson is just gone. I haven't seen that guy.
Yeah. And it's just so much. It's just propaganda. And they were huge when they came out.
Right. Yeah.
And it seems like, okay, maybe Biden do have Gen Z. And it just shows, I think these polls just a few months after the summer should just show people to give it some time over anything that the Democrats say.
You think Biden was basically trying to convince Gen Z?
He was trying to convince them because I think they had those numbers. I think with the resources that Biden has, he was tipped off that, hey, it ain't looking good
so they're
for
trying
Gen
to
Z.
like turn the ship.
And that's why they brought Harry and all the other propaganda, and it still didn't work. He was getting ratioed nonstop. It was sad.
And
some of it has to do with the Gaza thing.
Trump is one of the most punk rock presidents we've had in a really long time. And what I mean by that is clearly he is not punk rock in the pure sense of what punk rock is. What I mean is the fact that he's willing to insult people on TV, make fun of people for being fat. He's punk rock in the sense of screw you. You know, you know what's really funny?
Based. That's what they'll
Based,
say.
right? Exactly. Go back to 1990. Donald Trump is the embodiment of F you, I won't do what you tell me. And rage on behalf of the machine has become the F you, you better do what we tell you. So I kind of imagine if you're a young person and you had all these people telling you to be woke or else, and then Donald Trump is laughing and just pointing at the fat kid and making fun of him, you're like, that's fun.
Yeah.
Silly, irreverent. I can do what I want to do. Leave me alone.
Democrats somehow have created their own problem. It's sad, just through censorship and the forcing of all of the ideologies. It just isn't natural. These kids, they got common sense.
I'm just
Well, and
imagining.
they hate it. Like their teachers push this stuff.
Yeah.
When you have
Right.
teachers
Kids gonna be kids.
pushing
It's funny.
pride ribbons on everybody, and teachers saying like, "Let's all discuss our pronouns."
And you can't joke about it. Like,
Fast-
imagine being
right?
a kid that
Fastest
can't
way to
joke
make it
about that. That's
uncool.
crazy.
Fastest way to make it uncool. Kids don't think that what their teachers want to do is cool.
No.
You know, like my son
like-
came home
And
with
they
some
don't want
stupid
anyone
assignment
to-
about how you have to. The assignment was to do a biography of a scientist that was not white or male.
What? Oh, for real?
like-
That's real?
He was
Yeah.
like, white male, that's who we're doing.
And I was like, "What the hell is this?"
That's crazy.
And he was like, "I don't know, Mom. This is so stupid."
Wait,
I was
in
like,
New York or West Virginia?
West Virginia, Tim.
I've been saying. Cassandra's been warning about this. This is why it's so important what we're trying to do with West Virginia and Martinsburg, because these woke leftists it's a cult, and they move in, lie about their views, get elected to positions, and then start injecting this stuff into the schools.
That's right. There was another thing that happened a little bit before winter break where a group came in to talk about suicide prevention and started handing out the number for the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project, which is like, we're going to trans your kids. Yay. You know, that's their whole
Because
jam.
that's who they think is committing
Oh, my
suicide
goodness.
when actually it's young white males who are
Right.
committing suicide, right?
Right,
The
exactly.
group that the Trevor Project
Exactly.
probably wants to isolate or alter, fundamentally. I
Right.
think that's the craziest thing. We can acknowledge that suicide is a huge problem, but when you look at the numbers, they don't want to talk about who's actually committing suicide, and that's
right.
sad.
And
right?
it is, yeah, it is. And it is mostly like young men. And it's terrifying because, we need our young men.
Yeah.
I find it extremely concerning that the Democratic audience don't really talk about the suicide rates of transgenders when they are the main people that enable them. I mean, you would think they would care about all aspects of their health.
Well,
Yeah.
this is one of the most important things that I think needs
It's-
to be talked about in the whole issue of the gender ideology stuff. The first thing I'll say is with the news being Sean Strickland, what the woke left has done, Pink News, for instance, they said that Sean Strickland said being trans is an infection. He quite literally didn't. He said the weak man who is an ally is an infection. He didn't say anything about trans people. He was actually talking about the journalist. But the issue I see is what I was saying earlier is I got no issue with trans people. I have an issue with people who are pushing people towards dangerous medical practices, or pseudo medical practices, which can result in a loss of life. So, for instance, when we had Lance from the Surfs on, I said that I believe there is a trans genocide, and it's the left that is pushing it, and I stand by that. They're trying to sterilize, or the things they're offering up to trans people to a great degree, sterilize them, and that will prevent them from having children. Genocide doesn't just mean you go and you kill a bunch of people. One component of genocide would be to sterilize them, mass sterilization and eugenics. And so what's happening now is you have a young person who's suffering gender dysphoria, and they immediately jump to, let's give them irreversible drugs and surgery, which will prevent them from having families in the future. It seems like some like for whatever reason they want to do this, maybe it's because they're misguided, maybe it's because they're evil. But as you reference suicide, the point I made was if the suicide rate of trans individuals suffering from gender dysphoria is around 48%, I believe, right? Was it the number? 40 to 50%. But the desistance rate at best for trans children is 65%. It could be as high as like 95% or whatever. That would mean that Democrats are increasing the probability of suicide in children. Because if you leave the child alone, there's a 2-to-1 chance they desist and puberty cures them of their dysphoria. They then push them to transition, giving them a 50-50 chance of dying, which means the greater chance of survival is leave them alone. Now, this is according to the studies that are available right now from the major academic institutions. Why then are they pushing it? I think they're evil.
And they make money off of it, right? It's more effective to have someone who's suffering and dependent on the medical system. I think ultimately it's they
Create
need
new victims.
right. And if like we're talking about teenagers being defiant. So if you're a teenager who goes through surgery, who goes through whatever, your body's permanently disfigured. Some might come out and say like, no, this is wrong. But a lot of them will just suffer, but then also feel threatened and say like, no, you guys don't understand. I just have to keep trying, have to keep pushing. It becomes this thing. And they are trying to build people who will eventually support this movement because they know that to admit that they were wrong is ultimately to say that they have made the worst decision someone could make.
And admitting you wrong, I mean, the opposite. It's the opposite of submission. Is not even admitting it. So that is a submissive type of person that they're building, regardless. Because if they can't stand for themselves, they're submitting.
Yeah,
to the
I
system.
think that's
it is a low suicide rate even in the trans community. A study. This is from Lior Sapir in the City Journal, which I've referenced a bunch of times from last spring. A UK study found that the suicide rate among clinic-referred transgender identified youth was 0.03%, or 4 deaths out of 15,000 gender-distressed minors. In the U.S., where between 2.1% and 9.1% of youth now identify as trans, and where rates of diagnoses of gender dysphoria have skyrocketed, we are told the numbers of trans kids have always existed.
All right. Well,
in which case, why
so
haven't we seen a suicide epidemic?
Now, what's the suicide rate for trans adults?
I don't know.
You want to pull that one up because either we're dealing with false statistics, the argument being that suicide rates are really high and that's what we're trying to prevent. That's what Jack Dorsey said to me on the Joe Rogan podcast. Or the issue is that kids who are suffering from gender dysphoria have an extremely low suicide rate, and the argument for them to receive this surgery or medication is based on a false premise.
It says, this is the Williams Institute. I'm not super familiar with this. It's out of UCLA. It says 44 reported suicidal ideation, 7% suicide attempt, and 21% non-suicidal self-injury over their lifetime.
Well, what's the percentage? What's the suicide percentage?
42% have attempted it. 56% have engaged in non-suicidal.
We'll clarify then. Attempted suicides at 42% for trans adults, meaning these kids don't. If that data is correct, these kids are not trying to do this.
Right.
But if they become adults, that actually is the point I'm making. You are increasing the likelihood they will attempt suicide by putting them through these transitions. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.